Hello, all, and good morning to you, all my friends out there in Facebook land, YouTube world, YouTube world. I messed that up myself. LinkedIn area, wherever you're watching. It's your good buddy Phil here. Welcome to my live feed. I am going to tell you right now at the top of the hour. This is probably not going to last the whole episode today. I'm really out of it, not feeling too well at all. We had our flu shots yesterday, and I think I'm just kind of feeling the brunt of that right now. But I did want to log in, just of course, to say hello and say hi to everybody here. So let's see who's here already. Silver Knight, how you doing, sir? Good to see you. Psychedelic, how are you, sir? And thank you for the recommendation on the iPad. They don't do it at Telstar, but I'm going to be looking around, I think, a little bit later today as well. I'm hoping I don't have to buy a new one. We'll get into that too. Zach, good morning to you again. Good morning, good morning. We just wait a few minutes here. Thank you, Zach. I've had a very rough week myself, which you can probably tell because I didn't have a whole lot of videos coming out, especially compared to the week prior. And the reason is that my iPad, Master and Madam, how are you? My iPad just decided it does not want to work anymore. And I use my iPad Pro. I've been using it since 2015. This is actually a refurbishment because I had an issue last year as well. Really for a lot of the stuff that I do with my channel, a lot of my artwork. So it kind of pulled the rug out from under me, but I'm trying to see some different alternatives I could do. If I could maybe try to use my phone here for drawing as well, because really all the graphics that you see on my channel, all of the title art, everything like that, I all do that on my iPad. So it's definitely a big adjustment. I mean, look, drawing-wise, yeah, I could always do pen and paper, but now I'm kind of accustomed to digital. It's just so easy and cheap, and it's good on storage. But look, at the end of the day, as you guys know, I have an 8-month, almost 9-month-old to feed, and we're heading into the holiday season. So a new iPad may not be in the cards, especially not a Pro. I think they're about $1,000, but look, who knows what Black Friday will bring? We don't know. So I've got to play around with a couple things on my phone and see if I could pull that off. Even like the, not the editing in iMovie, which I'm not a fan of. Hey, Trev. But the kind of YouTube editing and stuff like that, as far as inserting cards, putting in the ending screens and whatnot. I do that all on the iPad. I'm not sure if I could do that on the phone. I haven't had success doing that, but I'm going to have to give it a shot. Let's see. So getting to comics. First, of course, thank you to all our veterans. Once again, Master. I'm not sure if anybody else here is a vet, but I know Master off the top of my head. My wife and I used to do actually a lot of, we were members of the Elks. I was a member for about 10 years. She was there for about 4 years. And we did a lot of work with on the Veterans Committee. And it's always something that we kind of sought out to do especially. But yeah, other than that too, hey, look, this is, I'll say this again towards the end of the show. This is also the last day that you can vote on the Comic Book Community Awards. So if you haven't done so already, you might want to try that. I'm nominated for People's Choice. I'll be honest with you, I'm not optimistic because I got some pretty heavy hitters in my category, but I had fun doing it. It's a joy just to be nominated, but I'm still trying. I actually have been reading the trade paperback for Volume 1 of Rising Stars lately, which I'll be giving that away at some point when I start doing giveaways again. I have to figure out the shipping of it because, like, shipping out some of this stuff, I'll be honest with you, that Comics Curing Cancer painting I did, I shipped that out, and I think I way overpaid from, some of the people I talk to who regularly ship stuff out. It cost me about $35, and yeah, I don't know. I've got to figure it out. Trev, maybe I'll scratch your head on that one because you are the shipping guru. Hello, Brian. Hey, Durs. Durs, I'm going to reach out to you, I think, later this week. Just be on the lookout. Comics by the Bay. Hello. I keep asking, are you like San Francisco Bay or what Bay exactly? Just my random thoughts here. And hello again to Brian. Does your iPad still work when plugged into the AC outlet? No, it is a brick. It was working, plugged it in, and then came back to it later in the day in blackness. it was like Spinal Tap, just all black. And I've tried charging it again. I've tried resetting it, rebooting it, and from what I'm told, I went to the Apple store last night. Oh, Palm Bay. I've actually been there. From what I've been told, my iPad is considered quote unquote vintage, so they can't do nothing for me. So, yeah, it's and I tried it actually when I walked out of the store. They have a little kiosk, psychedelics to keep it local. I was in the Rockaway Mall, and there's a kiosk for guys who just returned, excuse me, fixed phones. And I asked if they do iPads, and they spoke to each other back and forth. They were looking at it, and they were speaking Indian. I couldn't understand. I turned around, I was like, well, here's the thing. We can't really diagnose it because we can't get the power to run, so we'd have to take the whole thing apart. And I'm like, you know, that all just sounds really expensive to me. And I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to. At the same time, as much as I don't want to buy a new one, I don't want to spend like 3/4 of the way for a new one to repair this one. This was a refurbishment that's less than a year old. I had it, my old iPad crapped out on me, and they replaced it with this one. And I had that one since 2015. So it's like I paid basically $10 a month to rent an iPad for less than a year. But I don't know. Trev, we'll talk more on that too, because that shipping really kind of ruffled me the wrong way. So comic stuff. I had no pickups this week, zero, zilch. And yeah, in addition to things like buying an iPad, I've been trying to retract a lot of my collection over the past year, and I've been open about that. I've been talking about that. And so that also involves spacing out my visits between when I go to my LCS and not. And at first that wasn't by plan, and now it's more by design. I'm still chipping away at the books I bought 3 weeks ago, maybe even 4 weeks ago at this point. I don't even know. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I got to do what works for me. I'm kind of my long-term with comics. I'm trying to see exactly which way Marvel's going to be going on the X-Men stuff. I know that they're releasing a whole bunch of limited series between now and the summer. And in the summer, they're going to have a Fall of X event. So if that's the end of the Krakoan era, that might be my chance to kind of bounce off all the X-Men books and just maybe pick up Wolverine and maybe the main X-Men title. New Mutants depends on who the team is. X-Force I enjoy, but I don't have to collect. And really, as far as the other books goes, I'm enjoying X-Men Red. I'm enjoying Immortal X-Men, but I would imagine if they get to Fall of X and they're resetting Krakoan era, that those books will probably end. But we'll see. Because at the end of the day, look, I can read them online. I've collected enough. There's some books I refuse to buy more of just because it's like, all right, I have enough of these. Fantastic Four is a prime example. I love Fantastic Four. I don't think they've had a lot of success with creative teams over the past 10 years or so. I think I like Slott. I see what he was doing, but it just didn't hit there for me, and I wound up jumping off like I think 6 issues before he ended or so, right before the Reckoning War, Reckoning War. Hey, Jimmy, yeah, I mean, look, if I want to, I figure I could read it online. That's just kind of where I am. Ideally, if I could whittle down my Marvel list as well, it would probably be, again, like I said, Wolverine, the main X-Men book, maybe She-Hulk. I'm a She-Hulk fan. I've been collecting a while. And then really that would just open me up on the paper end of it just to reading more independence. Because if I subscribe to the DC service and I'm already subscribing to the Marvel service, then that kind of leaves me room to really pick up independence. And I've been reading more and more independence lately. Hey, Beckerman, how are you? I think everybody now is reading 8 Billion Genies, even though I really don't count Image at this point as a independence per se. I've been really liking a lot of the Aftershock stuff I've been reading. It seems like most of them are limited series, but they're done well. But let me show you what I did wind up reading this week. And I have to apologize. I teased at during last week's show that I had wanted to do a brand new way of reviewing my comics. I was going to do that every Monday. You were going to see that video. And unfortunately, with the iPad issues I've been having, I was unable to do that video. So I'm going to continue with the older way for now, and hopefully you'll see something soon here. Okay, so on the recommend of Main Event Comics, which if you're unaware of Main Event, I don't see him here today. I didn't see him in Brian's chat this morning, but he did our 7-minute stories last time. You could go ahead and look into the channel and look up that video. It was a very good episode, middle of the day, so it was a little bit different. On his recommend, I picked up Metal Society. I already talked about issue number 1. I did read issues number 2 and number 3 this week. I think the series is done, and I think I have the other 2 parts. I just couldn't find them at the moment. I surprisingly really liked this, and what they tend to do in both issues is kind of what you see going on right now in that Rogues Gallery book that I enjoyed, where one issue you're seeing the perspective of the human, and another issue you're seeing the perspective of the robot, and they're kind of going back and forth where you see it's like right before the fight happens, then you're going back to a couple weeks ago. And look, that could get very confusing very quickly, but the way they do it, it's simple to understand. You understand more of the motivations. And one thing I really enjoyed about this is that they're telling about exactly how humans and robots got to this area here without just being overly expletive. It doesn't feel like a history lesson. You know, they make it a point to leave their backstory as a backstory, which I really appreciate. You know, I've never been a big fan of prequels. I feel like many of them don't do well just for that reason that, all right, you could either do something really good or you could tell us something that doesn't matter or something that just should have stayed a backstory. Black Widow, perfect example. I didn't care for it. I consider that not necessarily a prequel, but what's the point, you know, after you've seen what happens to her in Endgame, you know, what's the point of having a Black Widow movie? But who knows? Maybe Thunderbolts will change that around. Overall, I did enjoy both issues. I'm looking forward to reading issues 4 and 5 at some point. And yeah, what's also very interesting, by the way, is that I feel like they gave the robot more human troubles. For example, I mean, I know one thing I faced in my industry, and I'm sure many people here have faced as well. And you know, don't be afraid, of course, to chime in. Yeah, there's always that fear that you could be replaced by a computer program or by an app, or that you're not going to be as marketable because of the way technology moves. And in this kind of situation here, without going into too much detail, the robot has the same fears because the humans are kind of underbidding the robots. So whereas now, now in our world, in our reality, the argument is that, well, computers are cheaper than people. It's the other way around, is that people are cheaper than robots in this story. And the efficiency seems to be comparable, at least what they're saying in the book. But like I said, I'm definitely interested in reading the end to that. The next one here, this is, and I have to look inside because they gave me a variant cover, X-Men number 14. And I'll be honest with you. Here's the variant, by the way. It's one of the X-Men trading card variants. I do have the original X-Men Volume 1 trading cards. Oh, here, it's all on the back, number 14. And while it's cool that they really made it look like one of the cards, even like the stats and everything, it's not for me. Like, I wouldn't have looked for it or picked it up. But that's what my LCS had, so that's what they threw in. I've been skipping Axis. It was just like, okay, here's another event. Let me see here. Oh, okay. It's a different conversation. Trev, you like the trading card variants? Yeah, like I said, there's nothing aesthetically wrong with it. It's a good picture. Magic, whom my wife hates. She's changing the baby now. They'll be coming out shortly. Great character, but it's like, okay, well, I go one way or the other. Like if this, I'll tell you, like if this cover was like an incentive variant or something like that, I wouldn't have gone for it. So as I was saying, I haven't been reading Access, or Axe, I'm sorry. I keep thinking of Axis. I remember that was like 10 years ago. Terribly named series, in my opinion. I keep thinking of the deodorant every time I see an ad for it. And, you know, when there's a big cosmic-wide event, and I'm not giving anything mind-shattering, hopefully, I could see where you have the tendency to derail some books that may have been shoehorned in. So I didn't really know a lot about what was going on in the Axis story. Some people have been telling me that there's some great moments between Nightcrawler and Captain America. And again, my famous moniker, I guess at this point, is I'll check it out digitally. But I'll give you an example. I thought King in Black derailed Sword even before it got off the ground. I mean, look, it wasn't a great series, but it had potential. And yeah, in this case, they succeeded in the fact that Axis, didn't necessarily derail this book. I definitely kind of felt a little bit out of the loop, but I kind of caught on what was happening, and yeah, it was a good read, not a great read. This isn't. This doesn't look like at least a particularly pivotal. Yeah, we got there. Chapter in the X-Men story. Yeah, I mean, it was just okay, I guess you could say. I do kind of understand the judgment towards the end, but like I said, at the end of the day, it was just okay. This jumped into issue 15, which I think is post-Judgment Day at this point. Let me see. I know that they were fighting the Children of the Vault. Yeah, this is post-Judgment Day. So I feel like they're getting back to their main stories here. I liked it. Children of the Vault wasn't a huge pivotal part. I really can't freaking talk. Part of the X-Men Krakoan story, at least not yet. This gives it a little bit more gravis. It's well done. It's good. It's fun. Yeah, this book, if you're reading X-Men books, and I know some people have complained that, well, it's not my X-Men. Comics by the Bay, you're 100% correct in. Yeah, some people who have been shying away from X-Men books because they feel like it's just not their X-Men that they grew up with. This is the one that you want to read, because this feels like a I'm going to say a lighter version of X-Men, the Blue Team, if you want to go back to the 90s. All in all, it was a good issue, and just like Comics by the Bay said, Forge, they've definitely given him some new focus on it. And Forge is one of those characters that they try to put the spotlight on every now and then, to different degrees of success. And the Krakoan era has been very good to Forge. And I won't spoil it for you. I know that this is a couple months old at this point because I'm not up on things. But there is another mutant appearance, another longtime X-Force character who has been missing from Krakoan up until recently. Yeah, Trev. I mean, look, they're not all great, depending on what you're reading. If you tell me what you're reading, I can tell you definitely what's worth your time. I could tell you right now, the ones I like the most: New Mutants. I've been quite upfront about that. Wolverine, X-Men Red and Immortal X-Men. The main X-Men title is okay, not great. It is more of, again, like that classic kind of feel. And at first, it's felt like a step back for me, but it's growing on me. It is. As far as Marauders, Legion of X goes, I can't recommend that. I didn't jump into Legion of X. Just kind of because the one before that with I can't even remember the name of it, with Onslaught kind of coming to Krakoa, like it fell flat for me. So I was like, I don't need to read this one. Just the X-Men title. Yeah, I mean, look, if you like 90s X-Men, you're going to like that book. And that's not to say if you don't like 90s X-Men, you're not going to like it. It's more of that flavor. In my opinion, the strongest of the two are X-Men Red and Immortal X-Men. And I say that because they work best, in my opinion, together. X-Men Red, I would say, if I describe it more, it was like if you had mixed Game of Thrones with X-Men, except there's no, bumping donuts for family. I've just been doing X-Men, Immortal X-Men, Wolverine, and a couple of miniseries here and there. Yeah, and the miniseries are kind of tough too. Like, I'm reading the Gambit one. I didn't expect to, but my LCS threw it in, and I've been enjoying it. What's the other one that just came out with the Laura Kinney Wolverine, X-23 Wolverine? Exterminators. I have the first issue that I haven't read yet, but I've heard good things. But think that what they're doing is I think that they're setting up these limited series to feel more like the classic stories, just to kind of lead into the Fall of X. And this is just a guess. I don't have any insider information or anything like that. It's just my gut. And it's a shame because I feel like that there's a lot of potential with the Krakoan era that they're just not scratching yet. I do think it's kind of taken itself a little off track since Hickman left, but yeah, like Inferno, I thought was just okay. But it's kind of interesting what's going to happen with the X-Men after Axe. I said it right there. Yeah, Magneto especially, by the way, in X-Men Red, total badass. And it reminded me of because of the cover of X-Men Red #6. Again, it was another Judgment Day tie-in. It didn't derail the book. I kind of got it. You know, I knew enough information to get around it. Wasn't the strongest of the stories. You do have some great Magneto moments in this. Magneto and Storm moments, I should say. The biggest issue I've been having with specifically X-Men Red, because if you're not familiar, what Red refers to is Mars at the end of the first Hellfire Gala. Yeah, Seth, pretty much. And you know what, I understand because I think people had a problem collecting X-Men at first because they felt like you had to buy all the titles to understand what was going on. And that was necessarily the case, I think, up to and through Ten of Swords, but they kind of moved away from that. And I mean, on the bright side, you let a lot of good titles shine during that. And a lot of the not so good titles kind of went away. The exception being Hellions, which was a great title that just went away. And my son is here, so you're going to hear some Grogu noises shortly. Hey, honey. You can sit over there. That's fine. Okay. Some really great moments with minor characters. They have almost every mutant you could think of involved in the newer X-Men titles, which is refreshing to see. I could say, though, if you're a fan of Storm and you're a fan of Magneto, yeah, that's the title for you. Yeah, Ten of Swords, to be honest with you, the things that it did great, it did great. The things it did bad, it did miserable. I would encourage you, if you haven't, to read it digitally or read a trade paperback. Excuse me. In the end, it just kind of didn't go anywhere. I think that was the biggest thing. And it took Apocalypse off the board. And that's kind of what frustrates me a little bit with X-Men Red, because this is where I feel like Apocalypse should or would return, but that's all another conversation. So X-Men Red, at the end of the first Hellfire Gala, the X-Men terraformed Mars, and everybody got pissed off at the X-Men. I talked about that a little bit last week. It's kind of like one of those racist jokes you hear when people say, well, go back to your own country. It's like, well, the X-Men had their own country, and you told them that you hated them. So, you know, we got our own planet. Okay, now you're off the planet and you still hate us. I don't know. It's a different kind of flow, and that's why I'm kind of interested in seeing exactly where the Krakoan Age is going. And I think what they did with Moira, and I'm not going to repeat it in case you didn't read it yet, was ungood. And I'm not talking about how they started. I'm talking about specifically what happened during Inferno. I did read X-Men Red #7. This is another Judgment Day tie-in. This is where I kind of felt like I was definitely missing something, because it opens up with, you see a longtime character dead on the ground. You also see, and I think I had seen this prior, one of the Akari X-Men had shifted their alliance. But there's a nice teaser at the end of this with Cable and, what's his name? I think Gizmo Kid, Gadget Kid. If you had to look it up. I don't know. Well, he was an interesting character in Sword, and then they made him evil, and then you haven't really seen him until now. And I don't know. I thought he died during Sword or something, so I guess he got better. I know that the X-Men have a whole resurrection protocol, if you're unaware of, and I encourage you to look into it. The X-Men Red, the Akari X-Men, don't believe in resurrection, so there's that factor in it as well. I read Immortal X-Men #6. I guess this is mostly my X-Men haul. I didn't realize at the time, but my LCS gave me both covers, the standard, which is a cool cover. And this is Mark Brooks. I know that their cover, the new issue, comes out this week, and I absolutely love the regular cover that's coming out. That might be my favorite Mark Brooks cover of all time coming out. I've asked my LCS to put aside a copy of the Noto Immortal X-Men shots from me. Phil Noto is one of my favorite artists. I should do a video about him soon. And here you have Sebastian Shaw in his mutton chopped glory. It was a great issue. Again, it's during the backdrop of Judgment Day. Immortal X-Men is more, it could be a very boring comic about government, really, but they've been able to keep it spicy and interesting. Yeah, Noto's one of my favorites. Look at his Black Widow series. That's amazing, the work he did on Black Widow. And then I think Sam Nee either took it over before, or it was on it either right before him or right after. Even more. Noto is actually the only reason I jumped on the Young Cable series, and I wound up loving Young Cable by the end of his series. Yeah, I mean, look, if you've ever wanted to read, hey, Matt Woods, everybody. If you ever wanted to read up on Sebastian Shaw, if you're like me and kind of was like, oh, okay, he's overpowered. Why should we care about this guy as a villain? That's where you kind of get a better picture of him. You know, I really do think it's his best appearance since, I mean, the 70s, you know, the Hellfire Club days. So if you're a fan of his, you'll definitely enjoy that. If you're an X-Men fan, I think you'd appreciate it as well. And the last up was Immortal X-Men #7. I have the Noto variant on this with a bearded Nightcrawler. Very cool Nightcrawler-centric issue. Again, it's an Immortal X-Men, excuse me. It is a Judgment Day tie-in. But I didn't feel lost in it, which, again, was a good thing. Yeah, I mean, it was a solid one. I love the art in it. It's, I want to say Pepe Lorenz. I don't think so. But a very kind of linear style. And like I said, it is a Nightcrawler-centric comic. Lucas Wernick. I've liked his covers. I didn't realize he was doing inside pages as well. But yeah, it's well done. You really get to see more inside of what's going on with Nightcrawler, his thought process and whatnot. And if you're an old Nightcrawler fan, especially, you'll enjoy that. Yeah, and like I said, Judgment Day, the fact I'm not reading it didn't really derail it for me. It did kind of make me wish I was reading at least the main series, but yeah, as I've said, I'm just going to wait for it digitally. So look, that's all I read this week. Again, hopefully when I get some technological issues figured out, I can launch that big review show I was talking about. Definitely a different pace, and I just kind of have to figure out how to pull it off, either with my phone or, you know, if I have to break down and buy a new iPad. You know, luckily Black Friday is around the corner, so it'll give me a little bit of an advantage, maybe, but we'll see. Other things. Oh, I do want to tell you, we did complete the bagging and boarding process finally. So we're going to be going on to phase 2, which is going to be the actual organizing books in long boxes, and also bagging and boarding the new pickups, because those aren't done yet. Everything I bagged and boarded were older books. I still have a good supply of bags and boards. I might just see if my LCS has more rather than ordering from BCW in case I do need them. Yeah, and then after that phase is when we could say, hey, anybody here like Human Fly? Okay, here you go. These are for you. You know, really kind of whittling down what I have, and it's an ongoing process. And again, I do want to remind you, oh, you know what? I'll tie this in because I think I started talking about this and I stopped. I do want to remind you that today is the last day to vote in the Comic Book Community Awards. You have until midnight Eastern tonight. I'm nominated for People's Choice. Again, I'm a realist. I know that I'm way underdog in this, but if you haven't voted already, hey, Wellbore, if you haven't voted already, I'd appreciate your vote. And I was starting to say this at the beginning. I was reading the Rising Stars Trade Paperback Volume 1, which is going to be a future giveaway. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. And it had a foreword by Neil Gaiman that I felt said a whole lot. And I encourage you to read the full thing. I'm just going to kind of summarize of it. So Neil Gaiman said that Straczynski, who wrote Rising Stars, in case you weren't familiar, approached Neil Gaiman before he started writing the series, and he presented a 5-year plan and said, this is what I want to do with this. Actually, he wasn't even talking about the book. I think he was talking about the show he did, Babylon 5, I think. I'm not big into sci-fi, so if I'm wrong, correct me. Hey, Kenneth. Um, and for TV, I think more so now than when Babylon 5 was on. Again, I don't know. I haven't watched the show myself. It's very fickle. It's very easy to see things come and go, and it's very rare to say, "I have a plan, and this is what we're going to do." And look back at Community is a perfect example. They were saying 6 seasons in a movie. They're finally, after over 10 years, I think at this point, getting that movie. So Neil Gaiman, in the back of his head, was saying he can never pull this off just because no network is going to let him do this. And of course, he said, look, this is a great story. I really like what you're doing. But Neil Gaiman's whole forward was about, look, don't ever tell anybody something is impossible. Because they might, number one, they might just surprise you and do it. And number two, you might discourage them from pulling off an impossible feat. So, if I win the award, which again, I know it's a long shot, but that'd be pretty cool. Like I said, I'm up against some heavy hitters and all great shows, and it is a pleasure just to get nominated. But winning would be cool too. I'm not going to lie to you. With that, if you missed the top of the show, I just got my vaccinations yesterday. Not feeling particularly great, so I'm going to call it a day and just pass out right here on the couch. And I'll leave you like I always do. Peace, love, and comics. Take care, all.